and welcome to this edition of the Boob Tube Buddies podcast, in which we are talking about American Gods, Episode 2, The Secret of Spoons. I'm Mothman, and I didn't think of a clever intro, so this is Devin. How are you?
Hey, buddy. I'm just so happy to be here, gosh darn it, again. Just
right?
I could close it out last time. Ecology, everyone.
Actually, I just thought of one in the moment. I'm Mothman, and joined by the air gun to my cowhead, Devin. Yeah, I got one.
Yeah. How does that thing work? I mean, I know I've read that before, that's what those things do, but I didn't think they were handheld size.
Yeah, I mean, I think
right?
it's just, I think there's just like a CO2 cartridge or something. So when you press it down, it releases the air and just done.
Damn.
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't know they had handheld ones either, but otherwise, like, they have it. I remember my first education of cow slaughtering came from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh.
Because there's a whole dialogue about it. The dude in the wheelchair in the car is talking about how they do it now because they're passing all these slaughterhouses compared to a very similar conversation here where they're talking about you used to have to use a sledgehammer. The difference, of course, is this guy wants to wax about like how it's an art and all these other things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know what? Before we get into it, though, just real quick plugs. We're on Apple Podcasts. That's probably how you're listening to us. Give us a review, subscribe, or simply go on social media and share or retweet or tell your friends. We're just trying to get more and more listeners. We're at 200 plus podcasts at this point. We don't charge any money, so it's a great way to support us. Obviously, if you do want to give us money, we have a Patreon account, but we also understand not everyone is in that position, which is fine. So just get the word out. But let's dive a little bit into it. The Secret of Spoons is the title. Did I miss that dialogue that made sense of that?
I think it's going to set it up for the next episode, which is weird. Because it's definitely not mentioned in here.
Yeah, I mean, unless it was like one line, I completely missed it.
Nope. I'm guessing, if anything, it had to do with the dinner party, I guess. But, I mean, the only thing I could think is they're setting up for the next episode with the other sister. That could be my only guess. But this show is a bit of an enigma, as I think we're all kind of figuring out now.
Yes.
There's a lot of trying to understand. So yeah, I don't know. It could be something with the Zoria sisters, or it could just be tongue in cheek about that dinner party.
Yeah, fair enough. So, my question to you, and I'm sure I missed this last episode, and I'm like really, really enjoying a lot of things about the show. I think visually it's really well done. Even the lower budget they have, like they pull off pretty well for the most part, it seems. But why, and I'm sure this was a line of dialogue, but why is Shadow just hanging out and following Wednesday?
Well, that's kind of his whole thing in the book, and this is what I was saying, last time. He's such a kind of generic character in the book that you don't get much. You don't ever get this answer of the big why question. You know what I mean? And his whole thing about why he was following Wednesday, all literally, even in the book, and we got it with the last episode, is just boiling down to the fact that he got the bad end of the deal on the coin toss in the bar. That's really all his motivation is for following Wednesday at first, and cash.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they have.
I
guess they have the coin toss to reel it out, and like he is hesitant to go. Mm-hmm. So maybe we'll just get more about Wednesday that'll clarify why he's so hell-bent on getting him. But ultimately, other than just like saying, well, shut up, I'm not going to go by the coin toss. I was just being dumb. I was drunk.
Right.
It also just kind of seems to be like he's gotten out of prison and his wife's dead and his best friend's dead. And then on top of everything that was going on with him, what else does he have to lose or look forward to? So why not just go on this road trip with this dude?
Yeah, I mean, Wednesday's got a little bit of kind of a trickster aspect to him too. Like that was one of the things in the bar sequence. He was so hell bent on making sure that Shadow drank at least 3 of the Meads.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a little bit to that, but I don't think it's ever really. I mean, I never took it as saying he was under a charm or a spell. He definitely goes on his own kind of accord, but that's always the interesting thing of Shadow, is that he's just kind of, I don't know what the right way to say it is. I don't want to say cannon for the fodder.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they do play. Neil Gaiman always played with this stuff, and I haven't read American Gods. I know you have, but even in this show, they're obviously playing a lot with like ritual, and not necessarily it being an actual spell where like he cuts his hand and pours blood on a pentagram and then drinks 3 shots, but just the idea of ritual when it comes to religion. They touch on it later in the episode when we're introduced to Media, which is Gillian Anderson, and she's playing Lucy Ball in the department store, and she's just talking about the ritual of watching TV and how it's all consuming, and now you need a little screen to make sure you don't get bored watching the big screen. So they're going to continue to play with that type of stuff, which I do find interesting. Don't confirm or deny this because you've read the book and we're not trying to spoil anything for people, but I did get a feel, and by the end of it I wasn't as convinced, but I got this feel that Mr. Wednesday was Thor, because he says, we need to go get my hammer, and then he blows a dandelion, which goes into the clouds, and then each of the dandelions basically are like hit or juxtaposed with lightning, and then he goes and meets his brother, who seems mischievous to say the least, a la Loki, and then also wants to decide someone's fate over a game. So, like, there's a lot of things to me that felt like Thor and Loki, and whether he ends up actually being Thor or it's just playing with these god motifs, like, that was the vibe I was definitely picking up on.
I won't spoil anything. I'll just sit here and say that you're on the right track, and we'll know the truth on it very shortly. This episode definitely sets up your logic for that.
Okay.
And I mean, you're on the right track, but we'll see here, and then probably in the next 2 episodes is the big event that I'm most looking forward to. Just simply because when I read it, it was so beautifully written that, but it was one of those things that I couldn't picture it in my mind. So I'm kind of excited to see how they portray it. But one of the things that this episode really does set up is it's starting to set up kind of the world building on who these characters are and what makes them, who they are. And that's where the Lucille Ball thing was just, I think, so brilliantly done. Like usually that part comes so much later in the books, so this was very early for this. So I wasn't expecting it. But it was done so well that, it makes you sit there and think, okay, these are everyday objects that are sure enough we're pouring our entire lives into, then why wouldn't they gain this kind of power? Although I did think it was kind of funny that however strong that TV's power was, HDMI on TV could
undid it. Yeah.
Undo all the TV.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, and we'll talk about a few specific scenes here in a minute, that obviously being one of them, but I guess my biggest issue with the show so far is that for the most part, I find almost every aspect intriguing, yet I don't necessarily like the pacing, right? So we got we get to see the dude with his like fully erect penis now inside the cosmos, which is really like the vagina of the goddess, and then she does the same to a woman. So now it's a little more clear that she's like sucking people in there. Last episode you let me know that was what was going on, but I think some people were kind of confused. But it's like that's the only scene, there's no real motive or discovery or anything, and it doesn't tie into the larger plot whatsoever. And then the opening scene, which I would love to talk a little bit about, introduces Anansi, and also, as great as it is, has no, that at least I could thread yet, no bearing on the current plot. Now, I understand they're all going to probably tie in, right? But I wonder what's the benefit of introducing us Technical Boy last episode, really, when he's not playing into anything. Like, I just feel like there could be a different structure that might lend itself to developing these characters and tying them into the main plot instead of just putting them out there.
Well, I mean, we kind of got today, or through this episode, Wednesday, Shadow is asking Wednesday, he's like, okay, so what are we doing? And Wednesday gives his kind of whole spiel about how he's building an army to fight back. And he's giving these hints about, hey, Shadow, you're depressed, all this life sucks for you, but hey, if you want to die, die, but it's better to die than be forgotten. So you've got Wednesday, who is obviously an older guy. He's obviously Czernobog. I always screw up his name. I can't pronounce Slovakian.
Oh, yeah. But, dude, that guy, I've always loved him. He is just such a treat in everything he is. Peter Stormare or whatever.
Is
so good.
The casting has been so fucking perfect.
But he is
show so far.
He is one of those characters that all I want them to do is find a way to put him in Fargo, even though he's already been in the movie. Like him and Steve Buscemi, I want to appear in a season of Fargo at some point, even just for bit roles. Because, I don't know, everyone in the original Fargo movie is fantastic, but I always just think of those two as like these ne'er-do-wells that also aren't the most competent,
Right. But that's what this is all setting up, is you've got these older, which I think you can now kind of pick up through some of the dialogue, is that they are gods themselves, and what they are doing is people are forgetting them, which means that's why their powers are kind of going away. And that's the big part with the I don't know, we'll say the Cosmo lady, the red Cosmo lady.
Gotcha.
And that's why she's so fixated, is because she's getting, rather than be forgotten, she's finding these strangers to basically momentarily worship her, which is kind of bringing her back. And that's why you're seeing, the tech boy. I still like Frog Boy better. And then you see it with Lucille Ball, which Lucille Ball is kind of a bit of a curveball, because she's an older thing. And they're using Lucille Ball to represent the new tech, but she's a new kind of god too, because we're worshiping technology.
And I wonder if they're going to have Gillian Anderson just play Lucille Ball, or is it just that like shot on the TV screen in there, and then later we're going to see her just continue to be different movie stars in different screens throughout. You know what I mean? There's a lot of ways you can play with it and not have it anchored to a beloved character necessarily from the 50s. So, we're about 13 minutes in, right? So I think this is a good point before we really dive into scenes and maybe start spoiling things for people. What is your overall rating of the episode? And then we'll go ahead and sum it up in a tweet.
I'm kind of go with where you're at, 6.5, 7. There's parts to it that are phenomenal, visually appealing. But honestly, I don't think if you have an interest in this content, and Ian McShane and the other dude, I screw his name up, the guy you like. Yeah. If it wasn't for those two, this episode would be rather dry. It would be extremely dry.
And that's where I'm at with it, right? Like 2 episodes in, I get that they're expecting there's going to be an audience that are already fans of Neil Gaiman, that are maybe already fans of these actors that like mythology. And that's a good assumption, but at the same time, there has to be a way to craft something, the first 2 episodes, where anyone that has no other interest other than like they just put it on with a friend would hopefully be hooked. And so in the pacing of that's kind of where I feel like they've fallen flat. Still, there's still so much promise, and it's not like I'm not liking it or wanting to turn it off, but just kind of judging it not as something I'm already interested in, but just as art that's out there. There's definitely some room for improvement, but without further ado, let's improve on it with our summon it up in a tweet.
Oh yeah, we're summon it up, summon it up, summon it up. Oh yeah, we're summon it up. Oh yeah, we're summon it up, summon it up, summon it up and up.
Tweet. Okay, we are back, and I just realized that Devin has never actually done one of these, so I'm gonna let you go first.
Oh, that's not nice.
Well, I want to bail us. If it's bad, I want to bail us out. I don't want to end on a sour note. Right?
All right. Okay, so wrapping life up in boxes, dick pics and all, going mental, turn down Lucy's tits. No worries, better dead than forgotten. Hey, look, a hammer.
Did that fit in 140 characters?
If it did not, I thought I tested it.
No, I'm impressed. You got a lot out there.
I'm gonna have to hang on.
Oh, you're fine.
Put it up on
Twitter. Fine. You could have.
Oh, I'm -2.
-2, but you
got
can
a
change it.
comma.
You can change a 2 to a number
comma.
2. That you can make that work. If you're only 2 over, you're fine. All right, so here's mine, and I love that we both touched on one of the same things. Shadow can't escape the all-seeing cock of his dead best friend. His journey with Wednesday becomes stranger, yet few questions are asked. And that is something. Okay, so while Devin figures out how to make his tweet fit exactly, we will go ahead and move on here. We're now officially on, I think, the spoilerific part of the podcast. So if you're just kind of trying to get a general overview and feel out the podcast, we appreciate it. Going forward, we're going to ruin some shit for you. So maybe tune out at that point. But anyway, how about the first scene? Like, I thought that was an amazing, impactful performance.
So Mr. Nancy, we're going to see later on in the show. So you were worried about whether or not, this was just going somewhere. The most of it, the story in the beginning is just kind of a throwaway, just Americana lore to it. But Mr. Nancy, we're actually going to see, and he's actually the main character of another Gaiman book called Insani Boys, and he
called which one? Yes,
Sonny Boys.
Yes,
Nancy?
Okay. Nancy Boys, yeah, the African guy. Uh-huh.
He is an awesome character. I'm excited to see, and he's portrayed so well. Again, the casting in this is so well done that it's like even Gillian Anderson with Lucille Ball, I thought did a damn good job. And she's amazing. But yeah, that whole opening sequence was pretty powerful.
Well, I remember there was a headline of an article that I didn't read because I wasn't trying to spoil anything, right? And the headline read, Brian Fuller, who's like the producer and actually the writer on many of these episodes, Brian Fuller wishes American Gods wasn't so relevant. I think Neil Gaiman said the same thing. And I'm sure they're going to get into things that are even more relevant, but like this opening scene is the one that felt like the biggest set of social commentary, because you have the African trickster god, who, I mean, I guess he's a trickster god. I'm not familiar with the origin. And he essentially tricks these slaves to burning down the ship, but at the same time, he isn't being dishonest, right? Like, I mean, he's just talking about, there's just so many good lines in there. One of the things is like, shit, you think you're just people? You don't even know you're black yet. Like, you haven't been exposed to, that concept that people are just fundamentally different based on their skin, and they aren't, but like, that's how people judge them. So that was just such a great line. But then he's like, look, this doesn't get better. 100 years from now, you're still fucked. 100 more years, 100 years after slavery, you're still fucked. You're getting shot by police, and not being able to work your way up. So there's just all this like passion and venom and vinegar in his performance. And then he just straight up turns into the spider. And I love how it starts with him just praying, but him also saying like, I'm praying because I can't actually give you like sacrifice by working the fields or doing this and that and the other, because I'm in chains. Please visit me. Please find a way. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Very good performance.
His prayer too really caught me, because I couldn't, the cadence that he was speaking, I couldn't tell if he was actually singing a song. Or if he was just kind of making it up at along, and I just sat there and it kind of captivated because I'm sitting there going, I'm like, are you just kind of talking, or do you just? I mean, it sounds like a song, but it's not following a set speed and it's changing syllables. But to sit there and set up and that nice kind of sweet kind of prayer, and then have Nancy come out in this like super pimp style 1970s pissed off angry guy. But it was just so good.
Yeah, it was so good. I'll be honest, like Orlando Jones was one of the casting options I wasn't excited about, and mainly because at first I was like, who the fuck is Orlando Jones? That name sounds familiar, but like I do not remember him at all. And he just hasn't been in almost anything I remember. Like I remember him being in that Evolution movie with David Duchovny. In the early 2000s, and I pulled up his IMDb, and he's clearly been in a lot as just in smaller movies and TV shows, but he hasn't been like a main star. But like that dude can act, and I also love the line about like he's talking about they're going to do all this to you for cotton and indigo so that people can have fucking purple t-shirts. And meanwhile, he's in this like purple suit, you know, which is kind of like a middle finger to the heritage and, you know, all that. So I thought it was fantastic. The other scene that we've referenced in the tweet that I will say, like, I mean, granted it's on Starz. I haven't seen a TV show that like shows fully erect cock that I can remember.
Yeah, I've never seen Space Boner, no less.
Right? Yeah, definitely never seen hashtag Space Boner. Well, I mean, Foxman like talks to no end about all the dicks in Westworld, but they're all flaccid.
Yeah. I actually had to deal with cleaning some of those up.
He does digital effects from his computer. He does not do makeup on penises on the set, ladies and gentlemen.
No. Yeah, I was a fluffer on set.
Yeah, the opposite of a fluffer. Keep them from getting hard. This is HBO.
Yeah, they just take one look at me and it just goes.
I don't know what else to say about that other than I was surprised, and I love that after he looks at his screen, he then looks at a picture frame and it's just the penis.
Yes.
So good.
I'm sitting there and he pulls out the phone and I'm just like, this is not, there is no good is going to come from this. No good is going to come from this.
Yeah, and I wasn't actually thinking that. I just thought he was going to find like a sexy conversation, right? Like, you know what I mean? Just clearly confirming what the rumor is, but I was not expecting it to be, you know, a dick pic. Yeah. So that was pretty priceless there. So at this point, I didn't mention this at the onset, but we actually have a brand new segment we are going to be premiering in this this podcast. Are you excited about this, Devin?
Yeah.
This is actually news to you, isn't it?
Yes.
I should probably loop you in on things. Philosopher, who has done Preacher Don't Preach segments. I've done a few movies reviews with him. He's really into mythology and philosophy and those things. So he has a brand new segment that we're going to throw to called I May Be Myth Taken.
Ooh.
Right? Pretty good play on words. So let's throw to him and hear what he has to say, and then we'll be right back. We'll also go ahead and throw to whatever ad it is we're going to do. So enjoy.
All right, and welcome to the first ever I May Be a Myth Taken. So what I'm going to be doing in this segment is just talking about some of the characters, the mythological characters and legends that are covered in American Gods. Neil Gaiman, he's got a book about Norse mythology, and that plays a huge part in the show. But I kind of wanted to just focus in on the smaller, lesser-known characters. And say, for example, in episode 1 you had Bilquis, which is a name most people aren't familiar with. They're much more familiar with her alter ego, which was the Queen of Sheba. And there's a lot of interesting stuff that goes into her. I don't know if vagina swallowing is one of her known abilities, but we all got to see that anyhow. But anyhow, this week what we're going to be talking about is Anansi. In the book and in the show, he's going to be known as Mr. Nancy. And he's actually known as the Spider. I think they'll discuss that for sure in the book, and I'm sure, and probably in the show. And he's like a storyteller, trickster type god from West African folklore. And he got brought over, which is like an ongoing theme with how these characters actually came to be like American gods. So Anansi got carried over to Jamaica, and then from Jamaica into America via the slave trade. Going back, he is this storyteller, he is this trickster, and you get to hear the storytelling in the book where he tells this great story about stealing a tiger's balls. And if hopefully that makes its way into the TV show. If not, you definitely have to read the book just for that one story. And there, when you go and you look up Anansi online, there's tons and tons and tons of these stories, and man, they're all terrific. They're great. They're like these fables, and I guess you could compare them to like Aesop's fables or anything where there's like an inherent lesson to be learned in there somewhere. And he's also like, the more you learn about him, he's sort of like this African Prometheus, where he brings rain and stops fires. That's kind of what he's attached to, in the same way that like Thor is attached to lightning and stuff like that. And he's also like took wisdom from the sky god and African in his African origins, the same way that like Prometheus took fire from the gods. Although Anansi, in his own unique way, he holds on to it for himself. He tries to keep it all to himself, and that's one of those great stories you can find online. But it's interesting because he does work as sort of like an intermediary between man and gods in the folklore, and then when you see him in the show, he's working as sort of this mediator between between Wednesday, Odin, and the character of Shadow. And the fact that he's a trickster and not completely trustworthy is also, kind of interesting when you're thinking about how Shadow is being thrust into this new kind of world. And, he can't really trust anybody or completely know anything. So it's a terrific choice by Gaiman. And the guy really has a knack for creating these characters based on like, these limited knowledge bases we have for some of these gods and legends that he's drawing from for his book. So anyhow, that's it for this week. I'll try and see who's going to be in the next episode, and then have something ready for you next week. All right, see you then. Peace.
Hello there, little buddies. Are you looking to impress your significant other? Well, we've got a way. Yeah, that's right. Go to blueapron.com/BTB and sign up for $30 off your first order. That's right, you can get natural, locally sourced ingredients sent straight to your door to make award-winning meals that'll impress the hell out of your lover. Take this one, for example. The mushroom and barley miso ramen with smoked dulce and spicy red cabbage. What do you say to that one, baby?
Me so horny.
Yeah, that's right. Try it now, little buddies. Sexy porn music provided by amzn.to.
Okay, we are back. Big thank you to Philosopher for the I Might Be Myth-Taken segment that we will continue to do throughout the rest of the season. And also, whatever ad we ran, that's another way to support us, so thank you. But what else did you want to talk about? You were mentioning, you were being very, I don't know, mysterious, but there's some plot device you were pissed they skipped.
Yeah, there's a very, very big event that happens in the book at this point, and it has a lasting effect on the rest of the story, and they, for some reason, didn't do it. And I won't mention what it is because, I mean, at some point, they're going to have to roll it in. I'm just curious whether or not the timing is going to work as well as if they had done it in continuity with the book. But it's just enough to kind of keep it on everyone's radar that there's a big event that might be happening that might everyone will be like, well, say what?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people that have already read American Gods, you probably know what he's talking about. If you haven't, this is on your radar. So like 5 episodes in when it happens, we can be like, this is what he was talking about in episode 2. And this is why it was a good decision, or this is why it was a bad decision, or what? They just didn't do it at all. Who knows? The only thing we haven't really talked about scene-wise, or at least referenced too much, is the Russian dude, Czernobog, or Peter, like that plays him, and that whole thing. I mean, he's just phenomenal. Everything he does, he's just so entertaining and engaging, and also he just does such a good job at being terrifying. I mean, there's that scene in the chess match where it does a quick cut to him hitting like a silhouette of him smashing a cow's head, you know? I mean, there's just moments in there that are like really intense, and they kind of show, to me at least, the intensity and the horror that the show is going to be able to kind of deliver on once we get to the right moments, you know?
This is actually where the show shines, like, phenomenally, is when you get those one character monologues. We saw it with Mr. Nancy at the beginning. You see it with everything Ian McShane does or says in the show, and then you see it with the Slaughter guy. is you get these, 2 or 3 minutes where they just command the entire presence of the screen and have dialogue that'll just last, and you're not, I kind of like everyone's seen Blade Runner, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
I hope
like
so.
the
at this
ending
point.
monologue, right as the guy dies. It's just stuff like that where you get so encapsulated with what they're saying, and you don't realize that really there's been no movement. There's been no high drama for the past 3 minutes. It's just been a guy or a girl talking. And you're just kind of encapsulated by it and captured by what they're saying. And the checkers game with him and his song is the same thing. Same thing with Nancy at the beginning of this episode, is that they command your attention and it drives the whole narrative without even really giving that much. That's that whole kind of, mythos. That's all that they're really talking. I think that's the part that makes the show just shine, is in those moments right there. Granted, you only get 3 per hour long episode.
Well, yeah, so it's one of those things where they have really good talent that they put in there, and the writing, like the dialogue itself, comes from Neil Gaiman, who has a way with words and is very poetic. And I mean, this show really shows that, between the Anansi scene in the beginning to all the dialogue here. I mean, just also to Ian McShane's one-liners. So there's a lot of really cool dialogue there. I mean, Shadow is probably the least intriguing of the characters, but you've kind of expressed that's how he was in the book. He's kind of like this blank slate that's taken on this journey, and hopefully they'll answer, why him at some point. Maybe it's just someone that's lost everything that can be a blank vessel. Who knows? So I mean, to me, there's a lot of positives going on. They just haven't struck the balance of all this great talent, all these great plot pieces, and overall like a very high-minded, interesting concept. Going around and finding all the gods, and not just the gods of actual religion, but the modern things that we worship, the so-called golden calves of our generation, such as media and technology. Like, they're going to dive into all those things, which I think is a really cool idea, but they do need to find a way to have a balance with pace, and introduce things in a more meaningful way, because otherwise, like, if it keeps going this pace, I fear they'll lose people that otherwise by the end of the season would be hooked. So I'm really hoping that episode 3 is that episode that hooks people, gives a little clearer path of what we're on, maybe ties a few threads together with these other gods we've been seeing, and makes people say, like, my God, I can't wait till next week. Because I'm excited for next week, but I definitely don't have this, like, cliffhanger, like, man, I can't wait to see what happens with this plot or this character. Like, there's just not a lot of that going on.
Yeah. This wasn't even really a cliffhanger on this episode. It was just kind of like, oh, we ran out of time.
Yeah, a little bit.
One of the things I thought was funny, though, is last week's episode, you had called out the Mr. Technology as being too Jesse Pinkman-ish. And it was funny because I had Breaking Bad in my head this whole episode, because they kept doing those zoom ups of like bubbles and the cooking and the tea and the filling up the bubble bath and everything. They kept doing these really close up shots of just, cutaway material and stuff like that. That reminded me of the cook sequences in Breaking Bad.
Wait, I didn't say Jesse Pinkman, did I? Because I did not mean Jesse Pinkman. I said,
no,
I thought I said Jesse Eisenberg.
Oh.
Yeah,
wait a minute.
The dude that plays, Social Network and Zombieland and Adventureland.
Well, there you go.
I don't know what I said now, but I totally meant Jesse Eisenberg. He is very like Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, which is terrible.
You're right. I totally blanked.
Now I do love Jesse Pinkman. I do love Breaking Bad. Anytime you can tie those two together, I'm all for it. And hey, you know what? Time for a sick plug. We're covering Better Call Saul. Not us specifically, but 2 other of the buddies. We're also covering Fargo. Mike, who did the segment here, is doing Sense8 with Kristen. Julia and I are going to be doing Twin Peaks, which we are incredibly excited for, and we're going to have definitely going to have this, but whether it's weekly or not, a weekly contribution from a long-time Boob Tube Buddies fan and a diehard Twin Peaks fan. So we do just have tons of content always going on. So tell your friends, tell your family, get people to listen, all that good stuff. I mean, do you have anything else you want to touch upon?
No.
Cool.
Wrap a bow.
Yeah, let's tie a bow on this bit, Devin. You got this?
Oh, well, gee, golly, gosh, guys, I really, really appreciate you having me on the show one more time. And I'll see you next week, buddies.
There we go. All right.
Running gag.